Hello, students of American government. My name is Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. Today, we are talking about interest groups, right? And we should be very interested in interest groups since their growth has exploded over the last several decades, and they are having an outsized influence not only on public policy, but in particular on public opinion. So it's important that we explore this, and it's convenient and appropriate that this is coming after our studies of public opinion. But at any rate, I invite you to join me on this journey, and let's get started. So the first couple of things I want to draw your attention to are some data, right? We're loving the data. It is United States government and politics. Now, political science as a discipline involves a great deal of data and statistical analysis. So it's important that we pay attention to these graphs. So just want to pause the video, just take a look at this for a couple of minutes and see what you can pull from this graph. We're going to be discussing this data in more detail during class time. But I want you to stare at this and see what conclusions can you draw. What is a major trend you can identify based on comparing the interest groups in 59 and the interest groups in 95. All right, next item. I'm going to just pull this guy over here. Okay, so this tracks the number of civilian employees that we have in government and the number of interest groups, okay? So when you look and you track the number of civilian employees, which is represented by this line here with the dots, and then you can track the black line here. Again, pause the video. I want you to identify a trend that you see in this graph. What conclusion can you draw based on looking at this graph? Okay, let's take a look at another one. All right, so this one is interesting. Now, it's looking at corporate, labor, trade, and non-connected groups, right? Groups that are just don't fall into either one of those three categories, okay? So since 1960, this piece of data is interesting. Interest groups have grown 70%. Wow, that's a big increase, right? So why does this happen? Why did this happen, rather, since it's already happened? Diverse cleavages of American citizens. Diverse cleavages. What does that mean? Is that even an appropriate word in a video lesson? Anyway, basically, you have Americans growing farther apart on different issues, okay? You have a massive ineffectiveness of third parties. So even though folks are somewhat aligning with one of the two major parties, they need another place to go that is more in line with their interests, and a very convenient place for them to go is an interest group that focuses on their batch of issues or their particular single issue that they are so passionate about. We also have massive changes to campaign finance laws. Most notably, the Citizen United decision in 2010 that basically allowed the existence of super PACs. And we will talk about this idea of political action committees, this super PAC idea more when we get to elections. But basically, it allows very rich folks with lots of money and lots of connections to funnel that money into an organization that doesn't have to reveal their donors. And this group can donate to political causes and, to a degree, political candidates with very little government oversight. So that also, the growth of super PACs accounts for, they are a form of an interest group, and that accounts for a lot of that growth. These changes to campaign finance law have been significant. But if you look, the total number of interest groups, you can track, when you look at this chart, you can track this increase. It peaked, I guess you could say, in around 1985-ish, and it's gone through a little bit of dips and peaks, but largely it stayed pretty flat. But right around when you look between 75 and 85, that's when you get this massive jump. So it begs the question, and perhaps we could discuss this in class, what happened in those 2 decades that resulted in this massive growth? I wonder. Okay, here we go. Now, if you're looking at expansion, you also have to look at how much they're spending, how much lobbyists they have, and how much they're spending. So number of groups, number of lobbyists versus the billions of dollars they're spending. So in just 5 short years, we spend an additional $1.5 billion almost on lobbying the interest groups. So that's a significant amount of money. In 5 short years, from 2004 to 2009, you've got an increase in almost $1.5 billion. That's a lot. That's a lot. All right, and now I want to review this iron triangle. I've brought this up in class before, but I want to hyper focus on this because now that we've covered the Congress, we've covered the bureaucracy, and now we're covering interest groups. So hopefully we can really see the interconnection between these three and why they form what's known as the iron triangle. So from an interest group perspective, what you provide to Congress is electoral support. That's what you are providing. What you are getting from the bureaucracy is a low regulation and special favors, right? And what the bureaucracy gets from Congress is this funding and political support. And then you see the inside of the triangle. So Congress, in exchange for that electoral support, gives to the interest group friendly legislation and oversight, okay? And then the interest group to the bureaucracy, in exchange for that low regulation and special favors, they provide congressional support via lobby, right? So they are helping to support the bureaucracy to Congress. And between the bureaucracy and Congress, in exchange for funding and political support, you have policy choices and execution, okay? So this is a very incestuous triangle. It's incestuous. I mean, it's ridiculous how each side of the triangle reinforces and supports the other. Noticeably absent is the American public. Have you noticed that the American public is nowhere in this triangle? Have you noticed this? So we're going to talk about this more in greater detail in class, but I want to give you I wanted to give you this visual, and hopefully it'll help you understand the interconnectedness between interest groups, Congress, and the bureaucracy. And this has helped to influence, as Congress has grown, as the bureaucracy has grown, this has helped to influence the growth of interest groups, in addition to their power, not just in number, but in their ability to influence public policy. All right, so role and reputation of interest groups. Let's talk about what they are, okay? It's an organization of people with shared policy goals, in many cases just a shared policy goal, as in singular one, entering the policy process at several points to try to achieve these goals, okay, or goal. Political parties fight election battles. They are not, in fact, interest groups. These are two different entities, okay? Political parties are policy generalists. They're not getting down to nitty-gritty specifics of things. And you can tell this by looking at any campaign website. It's all generalities. There are no policy specifics. I always want to know, yes, you want to solve income inequality. How are we going to do that? By making things equal. Really? How? Thank you. Thank you for that. But they're generalists, right? It's the interest group that's going to actually provide the specificity to a policy like that. And that will happen after they're elected, assuming they are. Interest groups don't, okay? They do not fight election battles directly. They can't, technically. But they choose sides and they can massively influence how an election turns out based on the type of ads and the type of messaging they engage in. In many cases, they do choose sides. So if you've got an interest group that is pro access to abortion, that interest group is going to run ads that are going to, in effect, benefit the candidates that are also pro-choice. Okay, so likewise, the counter, anti-abortion groups, pro-life groups are not going to necessarily directly support a candidate, but they're going to air ads and provide information to the public that undoubtedly will support the pro-life candidate. Okay, they are policy specialists. Interest groups are policy specialists. This is important to note. Now, we need to talk about these three theories, all right, of interest group politics. These are theories of how interest groups operate, how they enter our world, and how they interface with it. All right, so there's three: pluralist, elite, and hyperpluralist. Okay, now we're going to have a little class discussion on which theory you think has the most applicability to our current situation. So I want you to pay close attention to this. So pluralism, right? This was a favorite of the founders. It was outlined in Madison's Federalist 10. Politics is mainly a competition among groups, each one pressing for its own preferred policies. It's a competition among groups. That's what politics is. There are many centers of power and many diverse competing groups, right? So it's not all localized in one particular area. There are a lot of different centers. No group wins or loses all the time. In order for this system to function, compromise has to be a thing. No one group, got a little excited. No one group is likely to become too dominant in a pluralist system. in a pluralist system. All right, that's the goal. No one group becomes too dominant. Groups provide the key link between people and the government. That's what's supposed to happen. Groups compete. Competition is considered a good thing, a positive thing. This is a net good. And groups usually play by the rules of the game. Now, this is where pluralism starts to break down a little bit, because when was the last time you saw politically influential groups playing by any rules of any kind? I don't know. And then groups that are weak in one particular resource can use another resource that they are stronger in to achieve their policy goals. This is the idea behind pluralism. Effectively, what you need to pay attention to is this concept of competition. Politics is a competition. In order for pluralism to work, compromise has to be accepted. Compromise has to be the norm. If compromise is not the norm, if compromise becomes a dirty word, pluralism cannot function. All right, elitism. This is a favorite. So society is divided along class lines, and upper class elite rules. Okay, there's, regardless of the formal governmental organization we have, you have upper class elite that are ruling everything. We say we have a republic, but we don't, because the upper elite actually control everything. They set the rules. They are establishing all the rules of the game. And there's nothing else that, not much else that we can do about it. Numerous groups mean nothing because power isn't divided equally among them. So this is taking direct aim at the theory of pluralism. Largest corporations hold the most power. Elite power is strengthened by a system of interlocking directorates of these corporations and other institutions. So I hope your mind is going back to the Iron Triangle at this point. There's some significant evidence stacking up that supports this view of elitism, right? If you remember the Iron Triangle, right, that sort of describes a system of interlocking directorates, does it not? Corporate elites are willing to lose minor policy battles, okay? They are willing to lose those battles. And while the rest of us are excited about winning these tiny, tiny things, they're working behind the scenes to win the major policy issues in their favor. Lobbying is a problem because it benefits the few at the expense of the many, right? If you have the money, if you have more money than God, you can pay for as many lobbyists as you want. And lobbying equals access. Access equals your preferred policy initiatives coming into action. Hyperpluralism. Here's another interesting theory, and it does take issue with pluralism. So groups are so strong that the government is actually weakened, right? A government can't keep up. All right, this is an extreme, exaggerated form of pluralism. All right, the interest groups have become stronger than the government. Sub-governments are formed, which is basically a network of groups that exercise such control over specific policy areas that government at large really can't do anything to stop them. These many sub-governments, like I said, iron triangles, they aggravate the process. They make this process more difficult to subvert. It becomes more entrenched because of those iron triangles. Interest groups are too powerful because and then the government tries to make everybody happy. Have you ever heard, like the old axiom, like if you try to please everybody, you'll succeed in making everybody pissed off. Like, you won't please anyone, basically. So this idea of trying to serve all masters, you can't serve all masters. And that is effectively what the federal government is trying to do. They're trying to serve 330 million masters. It's impossible. And interest groups becoming more powerful than the government push the government to try to serve each interest, even more so than they ordinarily would have to. So we try to please everybody, and in trying to please everybody, policies become confusing and contradictory, because you're looking at this bill that impacts a number of different groups, and you engage in one policy. Well, that policy helps this group but hurts this group, right? Or this policy is really effective and helpful for this other group, but it completely pushes this group out of the way. So you have this problem of competing interests. You literally can't please everybody. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of part 1. We will come back to part 2, where we will go into deeper detail about how interest groups are able to do this. I hope you learned what you needed to, and I will see you in the next video.